Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Gabriel, the program coordinator for the Lewisboro Library. Tonight's program is Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia. This program is being presented by Sally and Jody of the Hudson Valley chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And actually, it's being presented by Sally, our incredible volunteer, who's a community educator with us and has a nursing background. And Sally, thank you so much for presenting for us tonight. And I will mute myself and let you take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us. As Jody said, that I'm a community educator and I'm with the Hudson Valley chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. And I am a nurse, and my mom passed away from Alzheimer's, and that's what brings me to volunteer for this association. I wish we had known about this association when she had been diagnosed and when she was going through the stages of Alzheimer's, because I've come to discover what an amazing organization it is. So if you ever know anyone in your family or friends, please let them know that this organization has resources that are unbelievable in being able to help families and people living with dementia. So we're going to get started. Tonight's program is called Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia, and talk about how they overlap. And we're going to really kind of take a deep dive into that. And this is what you're going to be learning today. These are the learning objectives. You'll also be hearing during this program from many experts today, as well as care partners and people living with dementia and caregivers. We call them care partners when people are in the early stages of dementia, because they can then participate in their care. So their spouses or their significant others are care partners. Later on, unfortunately, we do become caregivers. So as you see the learning objectives right here, it's a lot to take in, but you know what? It's really going to be meaningful to all of you that are here tonight, because we're going to be comparing Alzheimer's and dementia. We're going to learn about some of the risk factors of Alzheimer's disease and learn about the current FDA-approved treatments, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about if you have an interest in this field. And so now we are going to go to the next slide. Now, Alzheimer's is a global crisis, and you likely are hearing more and more about it in your personal lives and on the news. And so let's start off by seeing what you know about the impact of Alzheimer's disease in the United States. We're going to take a little quiz. And of course, you're on mute, so if you don't know the answer or you do know the answer, just, pat yourself on the back if you get it right. So here are some of the questions that I want to ask you. Approximately how many Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's? Take a moment and think about that in your mind. Come up with one of the answers here. And I will tell you that the answer is more than 6 million. That's an incredible number. The worldwide estimated of 55 million people are currently living with dementia. And that is 6 million Americans that are living with dementia. And this number is projected to reach nearly 13 million by 2050. Now I have another question for you. About how many Americans provide unpaid care for people living with Alzheimer's or other dementias? This is an incredible number. If you thought that it was 11 million, you are correct. Currently, more than 11 million Americans are providing unpaid care for people living with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. More than 80% of care provided at home is delivered by family members, friends, or other unpaid types of caregivers. and over half of employed caregivers report having to go in late, take time off, or quit altogether their other jobs due to the demands of caregiving. Now, these caregivers provided more than 16 billion, that's B, billion hours of care last year, valued at nearly $272 billion. So as you can see, this disease takes a real personal impact on the individuals facing it, their families, as well as a financial one. So let's learn a few more statistics about the impact of Alzheimer's. Those were some pretty rough statistics to see, and I don't know if any of you were surprised by that or not, but if you want to learn more about it, you can visit alz.org/facts, because these were some really hard facts to digest. So you're here tonight to learn more about Alzheimer's and dementia, and you may hear these terms interchangeably. They are related, but they are different. And now in this next section, we're going to discuss both Alzheimer's and dementia and how they're related. But before we begin, let's take another moment to test your knowledge about Alzheimer's disease. I'm sure you're loving these tests, but it's a good way of just seeing what you know. Okay, this is a true/false. Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process. What do you think? The answer is false. Okay, Alzheimer's disease is really more than memory loss. It's a progressive and fatal disease that kills nerve cells and tissue in the brain, affecting an individual's ability to remember, think, plan, and ultimately to function. Let's try another one. The true or false, people younger than age 65 can get Alzheimer's. We always think of it as maybe an older age disease, but the answer is true. People younger than age 65 can develop Alzheimer's. Approximately 200,000 Americans younger than age 65 are living with younger onset Alzheimer's, sometimes called early onset. In some cases, people develop this disease in their 40s or 50s. Shocking, I know. Now we're going to watch a video from one of our experts, Dr. Heather Snyder. She's wonderful. She's going to explain exactly how Alzheimer's and dementia are related.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow and the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
All right, so now you see what we were talking about in terms of how they're related. So dementia is the umbrella term. So you may have Alzheimer's and therefore you have dementia, but you may have dementia, but it may not be Alzheimer's because there are different types, although Alzheimer's is definitely the most common one. Now, it's very important also to get an accurate diagnosis. And we're going to hear from a care partner who's going to tell us a little bit about that.
Certainly, having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning because we began to understand where this was coming from in the brain, where otherwise we would not have known. Like we knew something was happening, but what was it? To give it a label actually helped, although it was a big umbrella. It explains some of the characteristics and symptoms that we were experiencing and seeing.
I also wanted to mention that it's not always the symptoms, signs, the different things that we may be seeing in a loved one may not be dementia at all, may not be any of the dementias that we had listed. This is why it's so important to get an accurate diagnosis, because there could also be a problem with hearing. There could be a problem with vision. Certain medications can give us some signs or symptoms that look like it could be dementia. Possible infection could be causing these symptoms of confusion or memory loss. So that is why it's so important to get an accurate diagnosis. And here's just a little bit of a recap of what we just talked about, that dementia is the general term, the umbrella term, and that interferes any of these symptoms that interfere with your daily life. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia, and it is not, I repeat, it's not a normal part of aging. Sometimes we get confused and sometimes we may forget an appointment, or we may put our glasses down and can't remember where we put them, but that's not Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's, unfortunately, is a progressive brain disease. So speaking
And
of
Sally,
that,
I'm going to jump in for 1
Sure.
second because I
Please.
forgot to mention, if anybody wants the participant guide, you can send me your email, or we can send it out through the library with Liz. So I just want you to know, sometimes I see people taking pictures with their phones, and I just want you to know that you'll get whatever information that you want. If you want a copy of the slides, we'll get that for you.
And then also, if there's more information that, this leads you to more curiosity or more questions, also the resources on alz.org will lead you to a lot of great information that you could use. So now we're going to talk about the brain, because as we said, Alzheimer's is a brain disease. The brain is the most complex organ, and it's our most powerful, despite its weighing only 3 pounds. And so now we're going to hear from one of our experts, Dr. Maria Carrillo, about Alzheimer's effects on the brain.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
So what we're learning and what we've learned about Alzheimer's disease is that there are some amyloid plaques in our brains and tau protein that get tangled up with this kind of stickiness that comes with Alzheimer's disease. I look at it like our brain is like the hard drive in our computers, It controls all our bodily functions, and it keeps our programs running through a network of pathways of over 100 billion neurons. And it's these pathways that are targeted and destroyed by Alzheimer's disease as it moves through the brain. And it's sort of like sending us to all the wrong websites. So when you start getting confused when you have Alzheimer's, it's because the pathways have just gotten mixed up or sticky, and we're not getting the right information in, and we're not getting the right information out. And I do just want to mention before we go on to the risk factors that there are things that we can do to increase our overall brain health. And it's very encouraging. And there is another workshop that's given called Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body. So if you're interested in finding out what you can do, because we do know that Alzheimer's, the disease process can start as early as our 40s or 50s and doesn't show up until we're in our 70s. But there are things that we can do to keep our brain healthy. And so if you really are interested in learning about that, check with Jody. She can help you to find out when a Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body workshop is on the agenda. So now we're going to look at some risk factors. Everyone with a brain is at risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. There are a few known factors that increase a person's risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So let's see if you know which one is the most common. Here we go. What is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? I will tell you that all three of these things that you see on the screen, genetics, family history, and age, are considered risk factors. But the one that is most common, or the greatest known, is age. So although Alzheimer's is not part of the normal aging process, which I mentioned before and really wanted to highlight, age is one of the greatest risk factors. 34% of people age 85 and older have Alzheimer's. 1 in 3 seniors do. Now we're going to hear from Dr. Heather Snyder once again about some of the factors that are risk factors.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's, and when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are 2 categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
In addition to the main risk factors for the general population, we found that Hispanics, African Americans, and women are at higher risk for Alzheimer's. Research shows that older Hispanics are about 1.5 times as likely as older whites to develop Alzheimer's and other dementias, while older African Americans are about twice as likely to develop the disease as older whites. The reason for these differences is not well understood, but studies have confirmed that African Americans in the Latinx communities tend to have higher rates of hypertension, obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular problems. It may be due to the health disparities that exist within these communities and populations, their access to healthcare, but nonetheless, it does put them at a higher risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. For women, we know that we live longer than men, and that makes us more likely to develop Alzheimer's because of the age factor once again. However, longevity and lower death rates can only partially explain this difference. And researchers are exploring how genetic differences, perhaps between men and women, may impact disease risk, maybe something to do with female hormones of estrogen and progesterone. Now we're going to look at a little bit of a recap of what we just learned. So we see that age is the greatest known risk factor. Family history is also a known risk factor. And there are two kinds of genes, risk genes and deterministic genes, that are two types of genes that are associated with Alzheimer's. And we have learned that there are three populations: Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, and women, who are at increased risk for Alzheimer's. And now we're going to move on, and we are going to talk about the stages of Alzheimer's disease. No two individuals experience the symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's disease in the same way. We're going to hear from another expert, his name is Dr. James Hendricks, on why this is the case, as well as we're going to hear from some individuals describing what it's like to live in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life. As an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
I'm like an overachiever and when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive. And I'm finding that I'm forgetting more. And they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor's. And so that becomes a little disconcerting at times, to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
So as we see, these individuals we just heard from are living in the early stages of the disease, and symptoms do worsen over time for everyone. However, people progress through these stages at different rates and their abilities change. So Alzheimer's disease, we look at it on a continuum. The progression of Alzheimer's disease from brain changes that are unnoticeable to the brain changes that cause problems with memory and eventually physical disability. This is called the Alzheimer's disease continuum. On this continuum, there are three broad phases as we look at this slide: teal, orange, and purple. The first phase is called asymptomatic. In this phase, there may be changes in the brain long before a person begins to have symptoms or gets a diagnosis. But as the disease progresses, the person will begin to experience mild symptoms, but still be able to independently perform most activities of everyday living. In this phase, the person may be diagnosed with something that we call mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. I know we've been hearing a lot about that. In the graphic shown on this slide, MCI is an early stage of Alzheimer's disease, meaning hallmark changes in the brain, such as amyloid buildup, which I had mentioned before, that it's present. MCI can develop for multiple reasons, and individuals living with MCI may go on to develop dementia due to Alzheimer's, and others may not. In the third phase, people who do develop dementia due to Alzheimer's will experience more serious changes in memory, thinking, and behavior. This phase is further broken down into stages called mild, moderate, and severe, sometimes referred to as early, middle, and late. These stages reflect the degree to which symptoms interfere with the person's everyday activities. And having lived through my mom's different stages, we saw it all happening before us. And I think when she lost the ability to remember my children's name, her grandchildren's name, it just hit home so much. And then for the physical part, I was caring for her, and she woke up one morning and couldn't walk anymore. She just suddenly, her legs just wouldn't work. The night before, she had been able to walk. And that's what Alzheimer's does to you. Those late stages are just absolutely frightening to the caregivers, to the family, and to the person living with Alzheimer's. But it's important, I want you to understand that the stages of Alzheimer's are general. And because each person living with the disease has a unique experience, we can't always neatly place an individual into one specific stage. In fact, some people may exhibit symptoms that overlap stages. However, the stages do allow you to gain a general understanding, and you can see this on the continuum of the progression of the disease. And as Alzheimer's progresses, the individual's behaviors will change, as does the role of the caregiver. These stages can help the caregivers prepare for what to expect and understand how to best respond. And once again, I will let you know that the Alzheimer's Association does have programs specifically for caregivers to help them get through these stages, and offers a lot of resources as well. So to recap, the three broad phases of Alzheimer's disease are asymptomatic, mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, due to Alzheimer's disease, and dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. The dementia phase is further broken down into three stages: mild, moderate, and severe. No two individuals experience the symptoms and progression of the disease in the same way. And while symptoms worsen over time, people progress through the stages at different rates as their abilities change. I know that was a lot of information to take in, but I hope that part of explaining about it was helpful to you. Let's see what comes next. Next, we're going to learn about the FDA-approved treatments. Now, until recently, the only treatments available helped with some of the cognitive symptoms of Alzheimer's. However, they do not modify or slow the disease. The treatments that may help to address symptoms of Alzheimer's include Aricept, Exelon, Brazodine, Namenda, and Namzaric. Now, what you probably heard about in the news was aducanumab, marketed as Aduhelm, which was granted accelerated approval by the FDA on June 7th, 2021. This is the first treatment that addresses the underlying biology of Alzheimer's disease, that is, addressing the amyloid plaques. However, it's super expensive. Medicare coverage of this drug is very limited. you need to be able to, you need to have been diagnosed in very early stages in order for it to have any significant impact. So when somebody has MCI and they are diagnosed, this is when it's most beneficial. So this is also something that the Alzheimer's Association is looking towards finding out more and helping more and more people to be able to avail themselves of this medication if they can't afford it. So because everyone experiences Alzheimer's differently, these treatments work in varying degrees and are not effective for everyone. And we encourage people who are interested in learning more about the treatments for themselves, a family member, or for a friend, have a conversation with a healthcare professional. It's very important to talk to a healthcare professional if you are worried about yourself or you're worried about a loved one. There's also want you to understand that if you are on Medicare, that your first annual physical with Medicare, you're able to get a cognitive assessment exam, and that will also be very helpful in getting a baseline if you're interested in that. Next, we're going to talk about advancing Alzheimer's research, because in the last decade, researchers have made enormous strides in understanding how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain. And many recent insights point towards promising, thank goodness, promising new strategies for treatment, prevention, and diagnosis. We're going to hear now from, I believe, Dr. Snyder.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease is a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
Growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. More and more research shows that factors like exercise, nutrition, and aggressive management of cardiovascular risk factors may impact our ability to slow cognitive decline as we age. And through current studies, we're exploring how certain lifestyle factors may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day. And I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
So as we just heard, there's a lot of hope for where we're headed with Alzheimer's research. One of the key ways to keep research moving in the right direction, though, is through clinical studies. Scientists are looking for new ways to treat Alzheimer's, and there are many drugs currently in the research pipeline. But recruiting and retaining trial participants is now the greatest obstacle, other than funding, to developing the next generation of Alzheimer's treatments. So now we're going to hear from some experts about the importance of these clinical studies for the future of Alzheimer's treatments.
Participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
You might hear the phrase negative trial, which means it didn't hit the endpoint. It didn't result in an FDA-approved treatment for the disease. But I think the only negative trial is one that doesn't provide us with valuable information. If the trial is well designed and is a good scientific experiment, we can get extremely valuable data that can help plan the next trial and make it even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even prevention.
So as we heard, everyone can help to advance Alzheimer's research. The only way to make sure that future treatments are effective for people of all races and ethnicities is to increase participation in clinical research. So that is why Trial Match, which you could find on alzheimers.org, alz.org, is a really important way that we can all contribute, whether or not we have any family history or not. Anyone can participate in these trial matches. So let's take a look at what we just discussed. Again, we've been really covering a lot of information, and I thank you guys for hanging in there with me on this. So we have seen that scientists have increased their understanding of Alzheimer's significantly over the past decade. There really is a lot of hope for the future. People living with disease, caregivers, and healthy individuals without dementia are needed to participate in clinical studies in order to find methods of prevention, treatment, and hopefully a cure. Both drug and non-drug studies are taking place across the country and online. Clinical studies may provide participants with cutting-edge treatment and additional medical care as well. Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching service for people interested in participating in Alzheimer's research. Alzheimer's is difficult. However, no one has to face this disease alone. And now I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about, although I've been telling you about Alzheimer's Association and what they can do for you and how they can help you, just going to tell you a little bit more about it. Alzheimer's mission is to eliminate Alzheimer's disease through the advancement of research to provide and enhance care and support for all those affected, and to reduce the risk of dementia through the promotion of brain health. The vision, our vision, is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementias. So how can you reach us? The association is available wherever and whenever you need reliable information and support. And if you press next, we're going to give you some numbers that you can call and some websites. So here we have on the phone, I guess you could click that, yeah.
I've had a couple of phone calls that I've been able to make in to the call center when I've had a couple of quick questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's been a couple of nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, you have questions, you have anxieties, and I was struggling dealing with them, and it's amazing. It was one of the best things I ever did, was keeping the call center on my favorites now. Just to know that there's somebody you can call who is aware of what you're going through.
So that was Tim, and he was using our free 24/7 helpline. The number's right here. It's 800-272-3900, and you can call anytime, day or night, to receive information and support. They have access to highly trained and knowledgeable staff who help with education, decision-making support, crisis assistance, and resource identification. They have master's level clinicians available around the clock to help provide in-depth care consultations and a free of charge navigation service offered to families at any stage of the disease. And also, just so you know, the help is available unbelievably in more than 200 languages. Next is our website, alz.org. You know, you can guess I'm a big fan, as I've mentioned it a bunch of times during this presentation. And it's often the first stop for individuals following a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or another dementia. And it includes sections specifically for people living with disease and caregivers. We're going to hear from Teresa, who's living with Alzheimer's, about what questions she had and the information she found on alz.org.
When I went to the Alzheimer's Association website, which is alz.org, there I was trying to find out more about what was Alzheimer's, what really is this disease, what is younger onset Alzheimer's, what is dementia, is there a cure, how long has this been around, how many people are affected by this, where can I go for resources, where can I go for help, what do I do with this? How can I handle this? Is there more people like me out there? Is there someone that I can talk to if I need to? And there I found the support line that's 24 hours a day. And there I found where I can go for workshops, where I can go and read things and postings that people have done, where I can find out what events is happening in the Alzheimer's Association, where I can see how it's affecting people around the globe.
As you can see, Teresa's a big fan as well. The last thing on our screen is something called the Community Resource Finder, CRF. It's a wealth of community-based resources, and they're in partnership with AARP, and they find out what resources are available, help you to find out what resources are available in your area, wherever you live, including long-term care and community-based services, local association offices, and their offering of programs and support services. If you go to this part of alz.org and /CRF, you click on that and a menu comes down, a drop-down menu comes down that you can put in your zip code, and then it will populate the screen with all the different resources that are available to you or to your loved one. It's really quite nice. We're actually going to hear from Tom. He's going to share his experience seeking help.
Since I've been diagnosed with dementia, the one place that I know I can go to for assistance and help and support is to the Alzheimer's Association. There are people there that I know by name that I can contact if I'm having a difficult time or if I'm struggling to find some resource, that they will provide that to me.
There's also another tab to click. Sometimes it's called alz.org/connected. And it's kind of like a message board with thousands of people on it who can share their different questions and answers and concerns. And it's kind of a wonderful way of being able to know that you're not alone, that there are other people out there facing similar situations, and they're more than willing to share what they've learned and to assist you. So that is alz.org/connected. Now, maybe we got you excited that you really wanted to learn how you can join the fight. And so let's take a look at that. Here are some of the ways that you can help take action, ways to join our fight. You can volunteer. And whether you can spare a few hours a week or make a more significant time commitment, consider volunteering with the Alzheimer's Association. There's a lot of opportunities, including becoming a community educator like myself, or joining your local walk planning committee. And you can learn more about that by going to alz.org/volunteer. Some of you may want to be involved in advocacy. Become an Alzheimer's Association advocate and speak out on behalf of the needs and rights of those facing Alzheimer's disease. We need people like you who are willing to go to legislators and talk and support and promote Alzheimer's needs getting met. Next, you could do Trial Match, which we talked about earlier. And everyone can help advance Alzheimer's research by participating in clinical trials. get started with the trial match. It's a free, easy to use clinical study matching service. So again, alz.org/trial match, and you can see if you would be eligible to help out with that. Then we have the Walk to End Alzheimer's, which I believe has been taking place in a lot of communities over the fall. It's held annually, and it's in more than 600 communities. You can join a team, and it's actually the world's largest fundraiser for Alzheimer's care, support, and research. And you can visit alz.org/walk to find out where it might be in your community next year. The last one is the Longest Day, which is also another fundraising effort that's done June 21st, usually I think is the summer solstice, and it's raising funds and awareness for the care, support, and research efforts of Alzheimer's Association. And here you see alz.org/the longest day. So that's it. I mean, we really went over a lot of stuff tonight and a lot of information. I hope that you were able to get what you wanted out of this program or know where to go to get more information.